I am here with Boris Malagurski, documentary filmmaker, director, writer, all around impressive individual, one of our best guests to have on the Duran. And we will be doing a live stream with Boris when he gets back from his tour promoting his new film, and that is what we are going to talk about. His new documentary called Sperska, The Struggle for Freedom. And I believe, Boris, you have already been promoting the film, but you're going to now do, this is going to be the second leg of the promotion, correct?
Well, we've had a bunch of legs, so to say. It's been quite a whirlwind experience. And first of all, allow me to thank you for calling me on the show again. It's always a pleasure. I would like to say hi to everybody watching and say that, you know, this film, Srpska, The Struggle for Freedom, has really experienced a lot in the past couple of months. When we talked about the film and, you know, we were planning the film tour, we had no idea what kind of experiences we were going to have. This literally exploded in ways that we couldn't have imagined. I mean, I was expecting a bit of controversy. Most of my films have gone through, you know, this controversial wheel where, you know, you have a lot of groups attacking the film and then coming to screenings and voicing their dissent towards the thesis that is presented in the film. But what we've experienced with this film goes beyond anything that has happened so far. So about 1 week before we were set to premiere the film in Western Europe, several Bosniak or Bosnian Muslims, as they used to be called, groups started attacking the film and calling on their members throughout the diaspora to write emails, call venues and cinemas where the film was supposed to be screened, basically demanding that the film should be shown. And the reason they had was made up. They haven't seen the film, so they couldn't comment on the content of it because they haven't, you know, seen it. So they just made stuff up. And what happened was cinemas were calling up and saying, look, we've been getting a lot of emails and calls, what's going on? And they've actually had the chance to see the film in advance, and they saw the film. They found nothing, you know, nothing what they were writing, what these groups are writing, was in line with what the film actually contained. It didn't promote any kind of hatred. It didn't promote any kind of violence. It didn't deny any violent event or anything that they were claiming in their emails and calls and everything. They were saying that this is a racist film, that it shouldn't be screened. And we had one cinema owner or manager, I forget, in Lausanne in Switzerland saying, well, I've seen the film, you know, which part is exactly racist? And the guy on the other line said, well, I don't know, I haven't seen it. So it's just absolutely spectacular. And so we were expecting these types of attacks, not on this scale, but we were expecting. What we didn't expect was that cinemas en masse would start canceling screenings based on absolutely nothing. So most of these cinemas told us that there's nothing wrong with the content of the film, but due to political and financial reasons, they had to cancel. What happened was a lot of them were getting threats. We've had one man in Switzerland threatening to burn down every cinema that dares screen this film. And the level at which he was so, you know, confident in himself is best seen by the fact that he signed his first and last name with his address and phone number in the email that he sent, threatening to burn down every cinema. And what happened was the police, actually, we reported it to the police, obviously. The police called him, and they asked him, like, did you write this email? And he said, yes, I did. And he's like, were you serious about it? No, I wasn't. End of story. So it wasn't even like prosecuted, or it wasn't, you know, a big deal for the police forces that we were getting basically terrorist threats for screening a film that doesn't attack anybody. I have to emphasize that, you know, the film was made with the blessing of the Serbian Patriarch Porfiria, which is a very important thing because our film team is very spiritual, and the Patriarch would never bless a film that promotes any kind of violence or hatred or anything. The film itself promotes peace. It promotes, healthy values. It doesn't even attack the Bosniak community, which reacted severely regarding this film. So it doesn't even go against them, but they decided to go against the film anyways. And we've had several cinemas, as I said, canceling screenings. It wasn't just the Bosniak community. This is where it gets really, really strange. We've had politicians in Germany and Austria that have nothing to do with the Bosnian community calling up cinemas, putting pressure on venues not to screen the film. The Green Party in Germany was the most involved in canceling the screening in Dortmund and in other cities. The Green Party in Austria also sent emails. We have all this. We have all the transcripts of everything they sent, putting pressure on venues not to screen the film. The Green Party in Graz in Austria sent an email to the organizer, a cultural center in Graz that was really strong in trying to show this film. And they showed me the email, and it was absolute lunacy. The things that they were writing, and at some point when they were confronted with the facts that none of what they're saying is true, they said, well, to preserve, the sort of peace among these divided groups, because it's obviously polarizing film, let's just not screen it. And this goes against freedom of speech, against every value that the West always claims to promote everywhere in the world. And now they're saying, well, let's not say the truth because, some people don't like it. And it is absolutely frightening to me that this can happen in the 21st century. As I said, if they had said, well, this is what we have an issue with in the film, this is what we believe is wrong, this is what we, consider factually inaccurate, that'd be fine. Let's talk about it. Mistakes can be made. I always say, maybe I make mistakes, but tell me what the mistakes are. But in this case, they didn't list any specific thing that they could find in the film. They just said it's denying genocide, it's promoting violence, it's promoting a new genocide, and it's actually, some have went that far as to say that the film itself is a new form of genocide, that the film is actually committing genocide. A documentary is committing genocide as we speak. I mean, this is such an insane thing. I can't find the words to say how insane this is. But after we've been through this, and we had, out of 25 screenings in Western Europe, after 22 were canceled, we were met with a situation where we thought, maybe we're not even going to be able to screen this film anywhere. But, we're Serbs. We never give up. So we basically found alternative venues. Some of them were Serbian cultural centers. Some of them were cinemas. Some of them were, we even had a really crazy situation in Dortmund in Germany where Cinestar, a German-owned cinema, wanted to actually screen the film. The local team in Dortmund wanted to screen the film despite the threats and everything. They said, we'll get, you guys can get security. Our legal team will take care of it, and it's all going to work out. It's going to be fine. We've seen there's nothing wrong with the film. And then the owners, the Cinestar headquarters, whatever it's called, they made the cinema cancel the screening. And we were really worried that we're not going to be able to screen the film in Dortmund because a lot of people wanted to see it. And then we were basically saved by the Turkish community in Dortmund, which is really interesting because Bosniaks always consider Turks to be their sort of protectors and everything. The Turkish community allowed us to screen the film at their cultural center. And, they really gave the Germans a lesson in European values, tolerance, and freedom of speech. And I would like to use this opportunity to thank the Turkish community in Germany for helping us screen this film. And the Bosniaks, really, the diaspora went, crazy after what they learned that the film was screened at the Turkish Center. And, there was this surreal situation where we had this one NGO in Sarajevo attacking the Turks for doing this. And his name is actually Murat, which is a very famous name from the Battle of Kosovo. The Turkish Sultan was called Murat, and here we have Murat attacking the Turks. So it's quite surreal for history buffs. But we've actually screened the film in Bosnia and Herzegovina as well. We actually screened the film in Sarajevo where a Bosniak media outlet, Bosnian media outlet called Oslobođenje, which means liberation, they actually invited me to their studios to watch the film, and they saw the film, and they had their disagreements with the choices that I made. What did I cover? What didn't I cover? But in essence, it was factually accurate, and they interviewed me on their O channel, which it's called O channel, and they interviewed me, and they voiced their disagreements, which are legitimate, and I accept it. Except for the part where they say it's a pro-Serbian film. And when I asked them, why do you consider it pro-Serbian? They say, well, it deals with only Serbs. And I said, well, yeah, that's the topic of the film. The topic of the film is Serbs west of the Drina River. So the film is dealing with Serbs west of the Drina River. And then they say, yeah, but there's other people living there too. I said, yeah, absolutely. But the topic of the film isn't all the people living west of the Drina River. It's Serbs living west of the Drina River. So at that point, I don't really hear anything else that supports this claim. So, they saw the film, and what happened afterwards is the journalist, Kenan Ćosić, who interviewed me, a Bosniak, was getting threats from Bosniak extremists for daring to speak to me in an interview. They actually had special television shows, special, breaking news programming in Sarajevo and in other media outlets dealing with my interview at O Channel. So this is, and I've watched, a studio full of people attacking me and my film. None of them have seen the film. And one of the journalists actually asked, have you seen the film? There's no need to see the film. And it's so surreal. It really brings us back to the times of book burning, and it is something that really boggles the mind and frightens the soul. It is so insane, because all I wanted was to hear at least one bit of constructive criticism. We've had journalists in Switzerland come to the premiere in St. Gallen from Tagesanzeiger, which is the largest Swiss daily newspaper, and the two journalists, I can't remember their names, but they've seen the film. They wrote articles about the film, and they were critical of the film, which is fair. They thought that I should have, talked more about some issues, and that's a fair bit of criticism. I could always talk more about any issue. I've had complaints from Serbs who've seen the film who say that, oh, you should have mentioned this, oh, you should have mentioned that. So this is fine. I don't mind that. This is not reason enough to ban a film just because maybe you should have mentioned something else. By the way, we went to Srebrenica. This was the basic, attack and argument used against the film, that we denied the genocide in Srebrenica. We went to Srebrenica. We filmed there. We, absolutely condemned the killing of Bosniaks there. We condemned all the crimes, but we condemned the crimes against Serbs as well. This is something that Western media outlets very rarely do. This is simply the fact. And these two Swiss journalists actually said, well, you showed images of crying and mourning Serbian mothers in this film. Why didn't you show images of crying Bosniak mothers in this film? I said, well, you actually could see Bosniak mothers in some archival footage that we put in the film from Srebrenica, so it's not like we omitted that part. But it's true, we did show Serbian women and mothers more in this film. But I asked her at some point, you've probably seen images of crying Bosniak mothers on Swiss media, is that correct? And she said yes. And I said, well, when was the last time that you saw images of crying Serbian mothers on Swiss media? And she said, well, I've never seen it. But see, that's the reason why we made a film that just simply talks about the topics that are omitted. And that I'm being accused of omission, but they never see the fact that this film was needed because of their omissions. But even those two Swiss journalists who heavily attacked the film, even they said in one sentence, the historical facts that Malagurski presents in the film are accurate. This is shown by our newspaper's investigation. That's a quote, translated from German. But it's a quote, and it really goes to show that if they could find one bit that is untrue, one simple bit in the film that is untrue, I'm sure that this would be the major thing that they would use against this film. But they can't find it. So what they can do is create an atmosphere of lies and deceit and hatred and threats to try to block this film. And now this film is coming to the US and Canada. I can only imagine what might happen there.
Wow. Quite an incredible experience with this film so far. But let's take a step back. And I was first introduced to your films through the Weight of Chains series. And you cover some very heavy topics, very difficult topics to cover. But I was very impressed with the way you cover these heavy topics. I would summarize the way that you approach your films as very, very detailed. You like to present the facts, but you present the facts in a very humane but also humorous way. So I believe you like to use humanity and humor to present your story. So for everyone that's watching this video, you mentioned a little bit about what this film is about. What would you like to tell everyone that's watching this video? What should they expect to see when they go to watch the struggle for freedom? What would you say is the topic, is the goal of this film?
Well, I think the main goal of this film is to inspire people to fight for freedom. And this is something that the Serbian people has done for centuries. I mean, this is something that is deeply embedded in our DNA. And I think this type of thinking, it's not just, the story of a nation. It's the story of a way of life, a story of some values that I think are getting lost in society nowadays. I think that, fighting for freedom or fighting for what you believe in is perceived by many to be naive. Like, don't do those types of things. Just, go with the flow. There's a saying, that only dead fish go with the flow. And if you don't have freedom, if you're not fighting the mainstream, if you're not fighting what you believe in, then are you really alive? And this is something that, is best seen in the example of the Serbs living west of the Drina River, especially because this group has been demonized to such an extent that is, without precedence. Since the 1990s, Western media outlets have been claiming that the Serbs west of the Drina River, basically, metaphorically speaking, fell from Mars. Like they came from nowhere. Suddenly they committed aggression against this land where they've never lived. When the facts very clearly show that not only did they live here for centuries and centuries before the war in the 1990s in Bosnia happened, but they've been constantly fighting to be, as they say, on their own. To be free means to be on one's own in Serbian language. So they've been fighting this fight against the Turkish occupiers, which really makes it interesting because we don't, present the Turkish occupiers in a positive light, yet the Turks in Dortmund showed the film. So we talk about this struggle against the Turkish occupiers, against Austria-Hungary, against, the Nazi and fascist regimes of World War II. And of course, we talk about the 1990s as well, but it's not the main focus of this film. The main focus of this film is this historical struggle to show that, you can go through basically hell, but in the end, the freedom that you're fighting for is worth fighting for. And we have a saying in Serbia, I'll try to translate, you fight based on how holy your goal is. So you fight for something that you believe is right. And if we don't agree, if we don't collectively agree that freedom is something that we should all yearn for, then we have a problem as a society. And the film does talk about Republika Srpska as well. For those who don't know, Republika Srpska is an entity within Bosnia and Herzegovina that was confirmed by the Dayton Agreement that ended the war in Bosnia in 1995. It's 49% of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And, the film basically explains how it came to be, that this wasn't, planned. This wasn't always this goal of Serbs to have a Republika Srpska, but they've always wanted to be able to be free and shape their own lives. And they fought for this against all odds, even at times when, for example, in the Veselje in 1875, when there was this huge uprising of Serbs in this small town that still has a proud history of rebellion, they basically rose up against the Turks at a time when they didn't have support from the West, from Russia, from Serbia or Montenegro. So these were Serbs that didn't have support of Serbia, yet they rose up and fought the Turkish occupiers. Unfortunately, their victory against the Turks was without reward, because they were automatically occupied by Austria-Hungary right afterwards. So what basically happened was you had this group fighting against all odds for freedom, and for centuries they were denied this freedom. Yet they never stopped fighting. And this is very important to note and to explain, because nowadays, as I said, you have a lot of people just giving up, just thinking it doesn't matter, it's not worth it, let's just look at their smartphones and let the state decide on everything for us. And I think it's important to have the self-awareness, and the goal of the film is to inform people about the facts, but also to inspire people and show them if a tiny nation in the Balkans can do it, anybody can. And Serbia and Serbs, as I said, we have dark stains in our past, like every nation. This is something that the film doesn't try to ignore or put on place under the rug. We very openly say that yes, in the 1990s, crimes were committed by all sides, including Serbs. But when you look at films that were made by Serbs that have to do with the 1990s, our side is usually the one that says, we all committed crimes, we condemned all of them. But then when you have the other sides and they make a film, they usually ignore the crimes that were committed in their name and only talk about the crimes that were committed by Serbs. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's humane. And we really tried to have a humane approach to this topic. And I think we've succeeded, because we've actually had some members of the Bosnian community come to some premieres, like in Vienna, and they saw the film, they raised their hand and said, look, I don't agree with your viewpoint, but I think that the facts presented are accurate, and there's nothing we could add to that. We could only argue, as I said before, that you should have mentioned this, and that's fine. I mean, it's an hour-and-a-half documentary. You're not going to get all the facts. That's not going to be the end of the story, but it's a really important piece in the puzzle that I think was missing for all these decades that the war in the former Yugoslavia was discussed. And this film puts everything in perspective. And I think that if anybody watches the film, they're not only going to be informed and inspired, but I think they're going to be entertained as well. Because, our host, Stefan Popovic, didn't only talk about the age-long tradition of people from Herzegovina jumping off the bridge, the 25-meter high bridge in Mostar. He actually jumped off the 25-meter tall bridge in Mostar. So we really went the extra mile to entertain people and present history in a sort of fun way. Even and by the way, that scene in Mostar was the last one we filmed, just in case. Basically, we did our best to make an entertaining film, and I'm really happy that, audiences in the US and Canada are finally going to get to see it.
Right. Is the cancellation due to how you are presenting the film from the time of the 90s? That's the controversial part. That's what's getting people to come out and try to cancel the film. Is that section of history that you're covering, even though you're covering a very long history here? It's that 1990s that is causing the controversy, and the fact that you're presenting it. Would you say it's fair to say that you're presenting it from a Serbian perspective, or is that an unfair categorization?
I think we're presenting it from a more objective perspective, and since it's been presented in such an anti-Serbian way for the past couple of decades, if you just try to be objective, it automatically gets perceived as being pro-Serbian. So if you look at what these groups were writing about the film, for example, the very first statement that was made against this film was by an NGO in Canada called the Institute for the Research of Genocide. And now that sounds really serious, but it's just an NGO that anybody can make. I mean, I can make it an institute for the truth about everything. And then it sounds like really, okay, these guys know what they're talking. They're an institute, it's an institute. It's not, an NGO, it's an institute. It probably has a billion professors and PhDs, and it's just this guy Emir Ramic, who's a Bosniak activist, who was actually kicked out of a Bosniak American organization for falsifying votes to the state president. So it's a really shady character, this Emir Ramic guy. But he has an institute, and he attacked this film in a statement saying that. Actually, in the statement, which is really strange, he didn't even say the name of the film, because Bosniak extremists have an issue with even uttering the words Republika Srpska. They're so annoyed by the fact that Republika Srpska exists that they can't even utter the words. So they use these words like RS. They're not going to say Republika, they say RS. They say the smaller entity because it's 49%, so it's the smaller entity. So they use these derogatory terms for Republika Srpska. So he couldn't even utter the words of the name of the film, but he just sent a link. So, and this is where the screenings are announced. It's the website of our film, and he mentioned in this statement that the goal of their campaign is to nullify and extinguish Republika Srpska. So Bosniaks consider, they're not going to be able to do it just by banning a film, and they haven't been able to do it anyways. But they want to delegitimize Republika Srpska as an entity that essentially its formation brought peace to Bosnia and Herzegovina. This was confirmed by the Dayton Agreement, signed by the biggest Western and Eastern leaders at the time, including the Bosniak leader Alija Izetbegović. So this is something that's so non-controversial. It's like saying that Bavaria being a part of Germany is controversial, and we should, extinguish Bavaria and it should all be Germany. It is, so absurd, but this is their agenda. This is what they want to do. And anything that presents Serbs in a light that is not negative, a light that is not focused on Srebrenica, on war crimes, on all these, anything that comes out that is supposed to be objective and not anti-Serbian. It doesn't necessarily have to be pro-Serbian. It just, if it isn't anti-Serbian, it's a problem for them. So, if you read the statement, you really see not only bad grammar, oh my God, but it's really a group of people that are fanatics, and fanaticism is an expression of repressed doubt. I think these people essentially doubt their own narrative because they can't back it up with facts. They can't say that, even the UN court never said that there was aggression against Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's absurd to talk about Serbs occupying their own land where they've lived for centuries. You have so many counter arguments to everything that they're saying that I think the only way they can, have their narrative as the prevailing one is if they ban anyone from ever saying anything that is different. And as I said, this is not me making up stuff. This is me presenting facts. On the other hand, we have them making stuff up about the film to make sure that their narrative remains unopposed. And I think the main reason why they're attacking this film is because it's in English. It's very much adapted for Western audiences. I think anybody who doesn't have a clue about the Balkans and doesn't know what's going on can watch this film and be properly informed. Maybe not fully informed. It's impossible for centuries and centuries of history to be packed up in an hour and a half documentary. It's impossible. But they will be informed in a way that will maybe broaden their horizons and get them thinking about some things maybe that they didn't think about before. So, I think that's an issue for the Bosniak extremists. And we've had situations where even the mayor of Sarajevo wrote letters to mayors of other cities asking them not to screen this film, which she hasn't seen. And when I asked her, come watch the film, then she said, oh, Malagurski's provoking me. Provoking somebody for saying you should watch what you're commenting? It's like common sense is becoming controversial nowadays.
Yes, it is. But before we get to, I want to ask you about what's lying ahead for the film in the United States, because I think that's going to be an interesting leg of the promotion. I read before we get to that part, I believe I'm trying to remember from which outlet. I forgot the outlet. Anyway, I read that the Republika Srpska is is looking to pass a foreign agents law, very much similar to what's going on in Georgia, in Tbilisi with the protests, where basically they would like to know what foreign influences are investing in NGOs, in charities, in universities, and once they understand what money is coming in from the outside, they would the NGO, for example, would have to publish the funding sources in their financial statements. This is done by the United States. It's done by many countries. This is the reason for the protests in Georgia. They don't want this, but I think this directly relates to what you're experiencing, and that's what I would like to ask you is, even though these people, these entities haven't seen the film, do you think there's something behind these people, these entities, in canceling or trying to cancel the film? There's other forces at work saying, we can't have this narrative out there in English, in a documentary, filmed in this type of way that people can relate to. We can't have this getting out there. I mean, do you think there's some foreign actors behind, let's say, the local Green Party or the local parties or the politicians in Bosnia or anywhere that's pushing them to cancel?
Well, I can't say what I can't prove, right. But if you look at the facts, and that we've had the Green Party in Germany, the Green Party in Austria attacking this film, I doubt that they were doing this just to please some, rich Bosniak political donor or something like that. I think that this is all part of an agenda, because many a political career were formed thanks to the wars in the 1990s, and a lot of people, became well known, journalists, politicians, based on a narrative that was fabricated to a large extent in the 1990s. If we look at U.S. President Joe Biden, he's very much against any form of aggression nowadays, but back when he was a senator in the 1990s, he was saying that he was suggesting to bomb Belgrade. He was suggesting to bomb all the bridges on the Drina. And this is, documented by video, and he was one of the fiercest advocates for a military intervention in the former Yugoslavia. So, he became much more well-known thanks to his activism and his advocacy of military intervention. And not only him, but Christiane Amanpour from CNN. She basically created her career on Bosnia, and a lot of other journalists that were reporting in a very black and white way, because cable news was on the rise in the 1990s, and they couldn't present the story in a balanced way because a lot of people would simply become confused with it. They decided to present stories in a very, black and white manner. We have the hero, we have the victim, let's support the hero, and let's only present the story in a one-sided way. Whenever there were reports of crimes committed against Serbs, it went against the narrative that was given to them by either their producers or their political figures. We've had Richard Holbrooke, who was a U.S. envoy for the region, saying that the Serbs were the only guilty side. The Serbs were the only guilty side. And when you have the government saying, this is the only narrative we're going to support and expect from you guys, the media is going to follow suit. And this is what happened in Yugoslavia. A lot of careers were ruined if they tried to present things in a more objective way. And this is, I think, what they're trying to do to me. But the difference between me and all those other guys is I really don't care what they do to me. I mean, I'm going to present the truth no matter what happens. And, I don't think I'm that important in this whole issue. When I was supposed to go to Switzerland to start my Western Europe tour, I was in a situation where I had, a 3-year-old kid at home, a 2-month-old baby at home, and I was getting death threats by the hour. This wasn't daily death threats. It was death threats by the hour. People telling me they're going to do gruesome things to me. There was actually this really, really disturbing incident where I booked a hotel in a city in Switzerland, and I was told by the hotel that the police came there to check if I was really if I really booked a room at that hotel. I didn't tell anybody where I was going to be staying. So this really I started getting a little paranoid, to be frank, at some point, like, how far are they ready to go? And this also, is an argument in favor of the idea that there were much larger forces against me in this film than just the Bosnia community. It's quite possible. But considering, the logistical support that they've received, and then when they couldn't get a venue to cancel a screening, that they, all these structures that are way up above them had to act. This goes, beyond some ethnic quarrel. I think a lot of politicians, a lot of media personalities would simply have to face some facts if this film were to prevail and were to be shown everywhere. But I have to say, considering that, we've been able to find alternative venues, they canceled 20-something screenings altogether. We've actually screened the film in 55 cities so far. So, in the end, we've screened it in much more cities than they managed to cancel. And actually, in pretty much all the cities where they canceled screenings, we've been able to show the film in alternative venues. They actually canceled the screening in Vienna, and then we had 5. We were supposed to have 1 premiere. We had 5 premieres when they canceled it, because we have a saying in Serbia: "Forbidden fruit is the sweetest." So when you ban something, when you cancel something, we live in a time when people want to see it even more. So they gave us free advertising. I have a friend in Vancouver who said that the amount of advertising that they've given us by basically promoting the film, well, in a negative light, but promoting it, any publicity is good publicity, as they say. The value of the amount of advertising that we've received goes well beyond $1 million. We don't have $1 million to promote this film, so a lot of people actually heard about this film thanks to their promoting and attacking the film. And this is creating problems for us in the short term, because we obviously, when a venue is canceled, we have to scramble to find a new one. But we always, in 95% of the cases, we find a different venue. But in the process, they advertise the film, and many more people come to see it. And it's not just Serbs. Of course, Serbs obviously want to see the film because it's about them and it's interesting for them. But it's mostly foreigners, actually. Foreigners from a Serbian perspective. It's mostly people from Switzerland, from Germany. We've had this really surreal situation where a Serbian center in Berlin actually canceled their venue because they were getting threats and they got scared. And then the Germans, a German organization, decided to screen the film anyways. So you had Serbs actually in one city being more scared than Germans to screen this film. And we're actually critical towards German policy in the 1990s as well. We don't talk about it too much, but we are critical of it. So yes, maybe to answer your question, after everything that has happened, it wouldn't be surprising for me that a much higher force was behind this whole thing, maybe using and exploiting Bosniak sentiments to ban this film and have them as a sort of army to promote their own agenda, where they threaten cinemas, threaten them with terrorist attacks and the like. And none of them were arrested. None of them were, if I threatened somebody, I'd be immediately, questioned and everything. But it doesn't happen to people threatening me. So why is that? That's a good question.
You're over the target, but you're about to go to the U.S. and to Canada. What do you expect to find in the U.S. and Canada, and what have you learned from your experience in Europe that could carry over to the U.S. or Canada if you face the similar difficulties?
Well, I've learned that, if a venue canceled, it's not the end of the world. The first couple of venues that canceled, I was really upset. Why is this happening? There's nothing, they're telling me nothing wrong with the film. So why are you canceling? Like, how much is, freedom of speech worth to you? So, but after just a couple of venues, in a couple of days, we realized that it's not a big deal. We're just going to find a different venue that has, in some cities, we had to change 3 venues in Zurich, for example. third time was the charm, and we found a venue that was not scared to screen the film. And we've had great experiences with the Serbian diaspora, with German diaspora, Turkish diaspora. Well, Germans not the diaspora. Germans living in Germany, they're not a diaspora there. And even the Dutch owner of a cinema in Rotterdam, he wanted to screen the film before it was shown. He saw the film, saw nothing wrong with it, screened the film there. So we had a wonderful cinema that I have to mention because the team there was absolutely amazing. And now I'm coming to the U.S. I'm actually traveling on Thursday, and I'm going to be screening the film. The U.S. premiere is going to be in Paterson, New Jersey, on March 17th. It's a sort of symbolic date that we picked for the U.S. Premiere and the start of the tour, because on March 17th, 2004 was the pogrom against Serbs in our southern province of Kosovo. And this is something that I feel very passionately about. The topic of Kosovo was discussed in many of my films, so I thought that this would be a very symbolic date to start the tour. And afterwards, I'm going to list the cities just in case anybody watching is in those cities and maybe the film's going to be shown in my city. So after Paterson, New Jersey, I'm going to go to Jacksonville, Florida. That's going to be on March 18th. On March 19th, I'm going to be in Northport, Florida. On March 20th, Orlando, Florida. On March 21st, it's going to be in Miami, Florida. Then I'm going to be flying out to San Diego. So San Diego is going to be on March 23rd. Vancouver, Canada, which is where I lived for about 6 years. That's going to be on March 25th. I'm very excited about that because I'm going to get to see a lot of friends. And March 26th is going to be Ottawa in Canada, the capital. March 27th is going to be Winnipeg. I'm not going to be in Winnipeg. That's the only city where I'm not going to be present. I'm going to be present in all the other cities for the premiere and the discussion afterwards. March 28th is going to be Niagara Falls. March 29th is going to be London, Ontario. March 30th is going to be Kitchener, Waterloo. March 31st, Toronto. Huge premiere there. Hamilton is going to be on April 1st, Chicago on April 2nd, Atlanta, Georgia on April 3rd, Washington, D.C. on April 4th, and we're going to be finishing the U.S. tour on April 5th with the premiere in New York City, New York.
And do you expect the same type of controversy in the United States that you found in Europe?
It would be
you don't know.
Foolish of me to expect it after everything that has happened. I'm just hopeful that the people are going to enjoy the film. And I listed all the cities. If people want to find out more where exactly it's going to be held,
I'll put a link down below.
Yeah, it's Malagurski.com/Srpska. So it's very straightforward. And I at this point, nothing can really surprise me. I don't know. Maybe there's going to be protests. Maybe there's going to be attempts to cancel some screenings. It's all good. I don't mind, because in the end, I've realized it's really good advertising. And this film is, as I said, I think when certain time passes and when it becomes more obvious what has happened regarding this film, and as more people actually see the film and realize that there's nothing what they're claiming about the film in it, I think that there's going to be a moment when it'll completely delegitimize all the groups that were attacking this film. And I think that their attempts in the future to do the same are not going to be as successful as they are. Cinemas in general are frightened to screen anything that has any sort of controversy. And this is something that we've seen in 2014, I believe, when the Interview came out, this comedic U.S. film that made fun of Kim Jong-un. And when North Korea, threatened various cinemas in the U.S., the largest cinema chains in the U.S. Withdrew their screenings of the film. So even though this was a film that is completely in line with U.S. policy, the cinemas decided not to screen it because they were frightened for their audiences. So, and I think a lot of people were afraid to watch it as well. So what's important to note is that all the screenings that we've held, there hasn't been any sort of attack, physical attack. There hasn't been any sort of confrontation. The worst thing that happened was in Vienna, where a group of hooligans went into the bathroom. They were too scared to go anywhere. They went to the bathroom, and they made some graffiti on the walls in one of the stalls and said, you know, this venue will burn or something like that. The venue didn't burn. You know, they just, you know, they were just scared. And when you're scared, you know, you go to the toilet. So, so basically, you know, this was the only issue that we've had. And this is important for me to note to audiences because they can come out and watch the film. These guys, their goal is to try to ban the screening. Once the screening gets underway, you know, they failed. And there's no point in, maybe there's going to be protests. I've had protests before. The Albanians were protesting in New York against the Weight of Chains 3 in front of the SVA Theater in New York. And it was actually quite a fun experience. And I remember the NYPD protecting the audiences when an Albanian man wrapped up in an Albanian flag attacked the audiences, and NYPD basically grabbed the guy, you know, shoved him down to the floor and arrested him. And I think this is the first time in history that the American police was arresting Albanians to protect the Serbs. Usually it's the other way around. So, you know, I think that we have to remain dignified in this whole thing, and we have to keep going. I mean, the easiest thing I could have done was to say, you know what, let's just put it on YouTube and let people watch. But it's as I said, far beyond myself, our film team, and this film. It's a matter of principle now. It is a matter of, you know, are we going to let these groups behave in such a way that they can cancel whatever they think something that they don't even know anything about? Or are we going to fight for just a society where we discuss the issues? And I think this goes beyond cancel culture, because cancel culture is you said or did something that, you know, is unacceptable to a group of people or in a society, and then they attack you for that. These are attacks from people who haven't seen, they don't even know what I said or did. And obviously that, you know, shows that there's a deeper agenda, whether it's, you know, finance from Sarajevo for Bosnian politicians, or it's more than that, and it includes, you know, higher echelons of power in Germany, Austria, or even the United States. I wouldn't be surprised. You know, the way this tour in the US and Canada is going to go is going to maybe answer that question as well.
Yeah. We're almost at almost 3 decades removed from a lot of what happened in Yugoslavia. I guess there's a whole new generation of people who really didn't experience what happened, and they were unaware of a lot of the narratives that were being woven at that time, that were coming out at that time. How do you think they're going to receive the film, the younger generation?
Well, we've had a lot of young Swedes, Germans, Austrians come to the film. Their reactions were really positive. We've actually had some people who came out, a lot of people who came out to attack the film. And then they've seen the film and they were like, well, we can't really say anything because there's nothing wrong with the film. It's all supported. I mean, when you're met with facts, like you can react in, you know, different ways, but you know, people who are generally reasonable are going to say, well, okay, we accept the facts. And, you know, as I said, you can attack the film for not maybe mentioning something else. And there's always, you know, always something that can be. A documentary film is never finished. It's never finished. But that is why we have these discussions. That's why I really emphasize the importance of me going to every premiere and answering every question. And I always discuss it with my audiences. And when the audiences say, well, you should have mentioned this. And I say, well, what? And they say it and say, well, now that you've said it, this audience knows that as well. And it sort of builds on the film itself. It's not, you know, full stop on the issues. It's a huge comma. So I think that they're going to react positively. I hope so. Maybe, you know, we didn't technically do it as well as we could have, but I think that we had some amazing, you know, shots, especially the drone footage is amazing. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. But I think they're going to be happy to, be better informed than they were. And I think that, once people realize that they've been lied to, once people realize that they've been misled and manipulated to achieve a certain political goal, they can get angry as well. And we've had people come up after the screenings and say, look, I really thought that, you guys were the only bad guys, and I, had a really horrible opinion of Serbs. Now that they've seen this film, it sort of puts things in a different perspective. So people become aware of the propaganda after watching this film. And this is something that's really important because we are surrounded by propaganda nowadays as well. And if we dissect what happened in the past, we can, prepare ourselves better for the future. And in that sense, I think this film is going to open a lot of eyes.
Yeah. The Weight of Change. Final question. The Weight of Change was very much a series because big topics, and I would guess that you needed a lot of time to flush out everything with regards to The Weight of Change. Are you going to take a similar approach with this film, because this is also a very big topic, and you mentioned that there's a lot of material that you probably cannot include in the film because of various time constraints. You have an hour and a half or 2 hours, and there's only so much information you can put into an hour and a half or a 2-hour film. What are your plans going forward? Is this going to be standalone? Are you thinking of broadening it out, or how do you see this going forward? Big topics like this.
Yeah, your question actually reminds me of a really funny situation we had in the city of Trebinje in Herzegovina, where we screened the film, and one audience member raised his hand and said, you should have filtered it out better. There were too many bits of information in the film. And then the next question, the next audience member raises his hand and says, there wasn't enough bits of information in this film. You should have had more information. So it's there's always going to be, people who would have done it different, especially people who live there and they have their own ideas about what happened and their own priorities. So when it comes to Serbs watching this film, I always expect there to be a comment. Oh, you should have mentioned this. You should have mentioned that. And that's fine. I accept it. It's impossible to tell everything. Our first version of the script, I've read it from start to finish, and I timed it. It was 4 hours. I was like, well, no, nobody's going to sit in a cinema for 4 hours. So we started getting rid of stuff. And then people raised their hand and say, well, you should have mentioned that. That was actually in the first version. But as I said, we had to condense it. This film is actually much more similar to the style filming for Montenegro, Land Divided, and Kosovo, A Moment in Civilization. Both those films, by the way, are on YouTube. So if people want to, get a sneak peek of the style of this film is going to be, and they can watch those two films. So Kosovo, A Moment in Civilization, and Montenegro, A Land Divided. I can't really say what I'm going to do in future. There's a really good reason for that, because we've had really good experiences with filming Srpska, The Struggle for Freedom, and the previous film, of course, Montenegro, Land Divided. I'll never forget the first day of filming of Montenegro, Land Divided. This was such an amazing experience. We just started filming and our entire film team was arrested. We were taken to the police in Podgorica, in the capital. I was interrogated for 5 hours, but they let me go. So what I'm trying to say is I can't really say what I'm going to do next, in fear of being, arrested as a prevention, against me going after different topics. Because the moment I announce that I'm going to be dealing with a certain topic, you could see the walls being erected. And there's a lot of people who simply profit from lies, deceits, manipulations, and they don't want the truth to be told. And I really have, no interest in trying to promote this other than just being free. And I think that we all live lives that have, a date of expiration, and at some point, we're all going to be gone, all of us, and the only thing that's going to matter is how we use this time. Did we use our time to lie, to spew hatred, to try to ban different opinions and attack people who think differently? Or are we going to try to listen? Are we going to try to fight for what we believe in and promote the truth? And I always like to be closer to the truth. I always like criticism that bring me closer to the truth. But this is something that has nothing to do with that. This is not criticism. This is an agenda. And this film and the way that they reacted to this film shows to me two things. First thing, it shows just how much this film was needed. Because if there's so much, so much dust raised, as we say in Serbian, about something, then it shows of the quality of what the dust is being raised concerning. But and the second thing that it shows is that movies, especially documentaries, have enormous influence. If this film was unable to change anybody's mind, they would just let it be screened, and they would say, well, it's not going to change anything. But in fact, films made in a way that is professional, that is, fact-based, that is technically very well done, that is shaped in a way that Western audience can understand it, they have enormous power. Enormous power. And as I said, I don't expect this film to change everything, but I think it's going to bring about much more awareness that we've had so far. And, films can change stuff too. In Kosovo, Moment in Civilization that I mentioned, the goal of that film is to show just how much the monasteries and churches in Kosovo have been demolished and wrecked throughout history, and that Kosovo, the self-proclaimed Republic of Kosovo, shouldn't be allowed to join UNESCO. And according to the Congressional Research Service in the U.S., that film is mentioned as one of the topics that had an influence on Kosovo not applying for a UNESCO membership in 2017. So that was our goal. We made, a modest contribution towards that goal. So I'm very happy that and to show just how much the institutions in the self-proclaimed Republic of Kosovo were upset about this film is they actually banned me from entering Kosovo, and they declared me as a threat to national interests and international relations of the Republic of Kosovo. So if you have institutions that are frightened by a documentary filmmaker, that just shows what clownish institutions they are.
Yeah. Let me ask you one final question before I let you go, Boris. One final question. You've documented so much history of not only Serbia, of the Balkans and of Europe and of the United States involvement in the area and NATO's involvement in the area. Serbia, once again, is in the news almost on a daily basis with everything that's going on in the conflict in Ukraine, as well as everything going on in Europe, EU membership, NATO, Kosovo. There are negotiations going on. Given everything that you know and everything that you've documented, how do you see things for Serbia and the Balkans right now? I mean, is there anything that you would like to tell, say, people who are watching this video, and the fact that you have literally documented all of these things and you put it on film. So I think you have an interesting perspective of the history and the past. And here we are again in 2023, and there's a lot of news about Serbia, Serbia's place in Europe, Serbia's position vis-a-vis the European Union, NATO, Kosovo, Metohija, everything that's going on there. How would you put things in perspective?
Thank you so much for saying Kosovo Metohija. I don't always say Kosovo Metohija when speaking in English, because I'm always afraid that people are not going to understand. But Metohija is this holy land that is actually a part of what we consider Kosovo. It's just one part is Kosovo, another part is Metohija. And it talks about, the fact that this is all church land and owned by the Serbian Orthodox Church. Serbs have gone through pretty tragic times in the past, and the thing that I would, the thing that I can gather from everything that I've learned about our history is that whenever times are the darkest, that is when we shine the brightest. And we've had situations throughout history when we were completely occupied. In World War II, we lost our state. We lost much of our army. We lost a third of our population. Every second male Serb died in that war. and it seemed that, that this was irreversible. Yet here we are. After everything that's happened, we were among the first to say no to Nazi Germany. The first rebel movement against the fascist occupation started in Europe, started in Serbia and in the region. Serbs were the ones who rebelled the first. So if you look at our history, and not to mention, in 1999 we were bombed by NATO, and the bombing ended with UN Security Council Resolution 1244 that states that Kosovo is Serbia. So we said no to the largest military empire on the planet so many times, and yet here we are. So as I said, if we can do it, anybody can. And I think that's why there's so much pressure being put on Serbia, because Kosovo is a very inconvenient story in light of current geopolitical affairs that are happening, because here you had NATO militarily intervening without a UN mandate. It was an illegal aggression against a sovereign country to take away a part of territory in violation of Serbia's sovereignty and territorial integrity. So we hear a lot about how horrible that is nowadays, but concerning a different country, not NATO countries. And we hear about that all the time. You can guess which country I'm talking about. So what they're trying to do is to get Serbia to accept that the bombing was just, that it's good that we were bombed and killed. That's a great thing that happened to us. And we should recognize the independence of Kosovo. First of all, Kosovo is not independent. It's the most dependent territory on the planet. They are completely dependent on US and EU support. It is so absurd that they keep telling us that Kosovo is lost, yet they keep forcing us to sign and accept that it's lost. If Kosovo is not ours, why do they keep asking it from us? It's simply absurd. If you just use your common sense, you realize that Kosovo, legally speaking, according to UN Security Council Resolution 1244, which is still in effect today, is a part of Serbia. And these pressures that are being put on Serbia is an attempt to sort of mask what they did in the 1990s and say that, oh, but that was different because we were doing it back in the 1990s. So that was different, that's completely. And look, Serbia says it's okay. So, what's the problem? And that's why I think these pressures are being put on Serbia. But as I said, in the darkest times, when all hope seems lost, we find a way to prevail, and we find a way to keep existing. So I think that is why, even with this film tour, they didn't manage to cancel it. They didn't manage to cancel the film. And, this is something where this is something that people maybe don't understand, but we really are fighting for our existence, because we've been denied this so many times. We've been the victims of genocide throughout history. Hundreds of thousands of Serbs were killed in World War II in the Jasenovac and other concentration camps in the independent state of Croatia. So we've had our own Holocaust. Not a lot of people know about this, but this Holocaust was in the Balkans against the Serbs, and we've endured. We live to this day, and we're not going to let any politician or any foreign power deny us the right to exist. We are fighting for our right to exist, and we will win, as we always did throughout history.
All right, we will end it on that note. Boris Malagurski, the film Isperska, The Struggle for Freedom. I will have all the information about the film, including the tour dates in the United States and in Canada, in the description box down below, as well as a pinned comment. Boris, thank you very, very much. That was a great video. Take care.